U.S. troops placed on heightened alert in anticipation of a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. President Biden holding a video conference with NATO allies as he considers deploying forces to deter the Russian threat. Also, the moment late today, the president caught on a hot mic cursing at a Fox News reporter. What he said. Also tonight, the wild ride on Wall Street, the Dow plunging more than 1,000 points before clawing its way back into the green. What's causing the stock volatility? The new signs Omicron may be in retreat. Infections down 14% in a week. Dr. Fauci on when the wave might finally peak. And the major new lawsuit filed over masks in school. The Supreme Court taking up a potential landmark case. Could the justices overturn affirmative action at colleges? Just in, 3 firefighters killed in a row house inferno in Baltimore. What we're learning. News tonight on the man suspected of killing an NYPD officer and wounding another. The growing concern of a rising violent crime in America's cities. And the first day to file your taxes, the urgent alert from the IRS and how to get your refund faster.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. Where words have failed to deter, the U.S. and its NATO allies are considering whether a robust display of military firepower in Eastern Europe might discourage a Russian incursion into Ukraine. The Pentagon tonight placing 8,500 troops on heightened alert status, many of them earmarked to join a NATO response force should the decision to activate it come. Tonight, Russia again saying it has no plans to invade, but it's roughly 100,000 troops arrayed at Ukraine's doorstep may speak otherwise. As a precaution, family and embassy workers have been told to leave the country amid worries Russia is already planting the seeds of a political takeover. It's where we start tonight with NBC chief foreign correspondent Andrea Mitchell.
With fears rising that Russia could invade Ukraine, President Biden tonight considering a major show of force near Russia, putting up to 8,500 U.S. troops on a heightened alert, mostly as part of a NATO response force.
Military action by Russia could come at any time.
The president from Camp David this weekend, reviewing Pentagon proposals to move thousands of U.S. troops to NATO countries around Ukraine, fly bombers over the region, and send ships to the Black Sea. NATO also putting more troops on standby and sending additional fighter jets and warships.
What this is about, though, is reassurance to our NATO allies.
This afternoon, the president, after a secure video conference from the Situation Room with European allies, insisting they are united.
I had a very, very, very good meeting, total unanimity with all the European leaders.
But NATO is divided. Ukraine's closest neighbors pleading for help. But Germany stalling on the delivery of German-made artillery to Ukraine. France wanting the European Union, not the U.S., to lead talks with Russia. Russia denies it plans to invade, despite sending more troops and jets to Ukraine's borders. The U.S. now ordering embassy families and civilians to leave Ukraine on commercial flights while they can, and warning civilians not to travel to Ukraine or Russia. Upsetting Ukraine's government, which called those moves excessively cautious and premature. But U.S. intelligence also warns Russia could justify invading by toppling Ukraine's president and installing a puppet government answering to Moscow.
There are a whole series of other actions that they've taken in the past and are preparing to take potentially in Ukraine, and it's important they be put on notice.
The U.S. is letting Russia know it could slap new export bans on semiconductors, potentially crippling Russia's strategic industries and military, from smartphones and tablets to military jets and civilian aerospace. Lester.
Andrea Mitchell, thank you. Let's bring in Kelly O'Donnell now from the White House. Kelly, do we know when the president will make a decision on any troop deployments?
Well, officials tell us, Lester, in the coming days, as the White House monitors Putin's troop buildup, and the Pentagon says the president is also considering additional U.S. troops in places in Eastern European countries that request help to fortify their defenses. That would be separate from the troops sent to work for NATO. Lester?
And Kelly, the president making headlines tonight also about a mic, I guess a hot mic moment where he's cursing at a Fox News reporter. Let me play that.
Thank you, guys.
Will you take questions on inflation then?
Let's move. Thank you. Thank you all.
Do you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Kelly, what is the White House saying about this tonight?
Well, we have not heard back from the White House. We have asked about this. Reporters were asking about Ukraine because the president has not responded yet about whether he has decided to deploy U.S. troops. Clearly, that's a critical issue, and reporters will ask about it. He made the point that he does not like when questions are asked about a subject other than the planned event, which in this case was about middle-class families and the economy. Lester?
Kelly O'Donnell at the White House, thank you. And fears about Ukraine and inflation sent the stock market plunging for a while today. The Dow dropping more than 1,000 points, but then look at this, a stunning comeback. Actually closing up almost 100 points, but the ride may not be over. Here's Tom Costello.
Unbelievably, we are up across the board for the three major averages.
It was a gut-wrenching roller coaster ride on Wall Street today, with last-minute buyers jumping in to pull the market out of a steep nosedive. At its lowest point, the Dow Jones Industrials down more than 1,100 points before climbing back and closing up 99. A 1,200-point swing, driving the volatility, concern about a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine and the global economic fallout. While at home, corporate earnings are coming in as inflation hits 40-year highs, driving prices higher from the grocery aisles to car lots.
The president does not look at the stock market as a means by which to judge the economy.
After the S&P 500 index ran up a stunning 27% in 2021, the market has been sliding for much of this month, with the Federal Reserve expected to raise interest rates as much as 1 percentage point this year to tame inflation.
It seems like a lot to happen in a year, but remember, we'll still be below where we were on the federal funds interest rate before the pandemic started.
56% of Americans are now invested in stocks. So what should average investors do in a volatile market?
Long-term investments in the stock market should be 5 years or more. So you don't invest the money to build the deck. You don't invest the money to buy a new car. You don't invest the money to generate your income when you're retired.
So, Tom, the Fed is expected to announce this rate hike plan on Wednesday. How will this play out this year?
3 or 4 quarter-point rate hikes this year are expected, depending on whether inflation comes under control. But the global supply chain problems could actually cause inflation to stay rather stubborn this year. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello, thank you. Let's turn to COVID now. While infection rates are now leveling off or dropping in parts of the country, hospitalizations and deaths are still rising. And health officials are warning we are not out of the woods. Miguel Almaguer now with the latest.
For a nation on the brink of a COVID catastrophe, tonight clear signs of optimism and what appears to be the impending end to Omicron's dangerous surge. As cases continue their steep decline in pockets of the country, new infections are down 14% across the U.S. The climb of new cases over the course of the pandemic reaching peaks and valleys. And now finally, after Omicron's unprecedented spike, experts say the most serious threat may be over by next month.
We'd like it to get down to that level where it doesn't disrupt us in the sense of getting back to a degree of normality. That's the best case scenario.
While Omicron's wave may crest by mid-February, its wake is still rippling across the country. Every day, more than 2,200 Americans are still dying. 16 states hit later by Omicron have cases spiking by over 100%.
We have all reached the point where we're just so burnt out.
Many on the front lines are struggling to see the end to the spike.
Things are sort of at unprecedented levels, and the numbers of patients that we're seeing that require emergency and acute care services is overwhelming our ability to supply those services.
As the first free N95 masks arrive at select grocery stores and pharmacies in the Midwest, Americans are also starting to receive their free home COVID test kits, with millions more expected to arrive in the coming days. Tonight, tools aimed at curbing the pandemic coming as the nation hopes to turn the corner. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
Some tragic news tonight from Baltimore, where 3 veteran firefighters were killed as they fought a fire in a vacant row house. They became trapped after part of the building collapsed. A 4th firefighter was pulled out and is in serious condition. The mayor there calling it a gut-wrenching tragedy for the city, the fire department, and the families. In New York City, the man police say was wounded when he fatally shot one officer and injured another on Friday has died. It comes as a spike in violent crime has some American cities on edge. Let's get more now from Stephanie Gosk.
The new year is already off to a heartbreaking start for New York City's finest. 5 NYPD officers shot so far.
We're going to get trigger pullers off the streets and guns out of their hands.
Friday, 22-year-old rookie Jason Rivera was killed. His partner Wilbert Mora gravely wounded when they responded to a domestic disturbance call. Police say LaShawn McNeil opened fire using an illegal handgun with an extended magazine capable of holding 40 rounds. Hundreds gathered to honor Rivera on Sunday. But it isn't just in New York. In Houston, a deputy was shot and killed during a traffic stop. And in D.C., police were responding to a man acting suspiciously when he started shooting, injuring one officer.
Have you ever seen violence against police officers at this level in your career?
I have not. I've worked 36 years in law enforcement, and I can tell you that this is the worst I've ever seen it.
Last year, over 300 police officers were shot nationwide, 63 killed.
We see all of this rhetoric, all of these attacks, these dehumanizing of law enforcement is really eroding the respect for our profession.
The violence against police comes as major American cities struggle with violent crime. Homicides nationwide surged nearly 30% in 2020. And while some cities saw homicides drop back down last year, at least 15 cities broke their all-time records in 2021, including Milwaukee, Austin, Tucson, and Philadelphia, which had its highest murder total in over 30 years. In New York, Mayor Eric Adams was elected on a promise to fight crime.
We will not surrender our city to the violent few.
Now battling a threat against the crime fighters he's relying on. Officer Rivera's funeral will be held here at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Friday. His partner, Officer Mora, is in an ICU tonight fighting for his life. Lester?
Stephanie Goss, thank you. And as part of that surge in violent crime, many American cities are seeing a dramatic rise in carjackings. Gabe Gutierrez has more on that.
5, 6, and Broadway.
This NYPD body camera video from earlier this month shows a brazen carjacking in broad daylight in Midtown Manhattan. The suspect plowed into parked cars as police tried to stop him. In a separate incident, a 14-year-old suspect was just arrested for this carjacking weeks ago, a particular crime that in New York City surged 55% last year. Also in 2021, Philadelphia saw an 85% jump. A congresswoman's car was recently swiped in broad daylight there. So far this year, the city's already reported more than 100 carjackings.
Carjackers have been utilizing a bump and run technique where the perpetrators initiate the carjacking by tapping your vehicle with their vehicle.
In Washington, D.C., a council candidate was carjacked earlier this month.
As soon as I came out, the vehicle was instantly in my face and guns were pointing to my face.
In Minneapolis, 655 carjackings last year. In Cleveland, 433. On New Year's Eve, Shane Bartek was killed during one.
Mostly Shane wanted to be remembered as someone who cared.
Police stress you should know what the carjacking hotspots are. Residential driveways, gas stations while drivers fill up their cars, ATMs, and streets with poor lighting.
The main advice police say is be aware of your surroundings. And once you get in your car, make it a habit to start the vehicle and drive away immediately, Lester.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. In just 60 seconds, the raging battle over masks in schools reaching a fever pitch now in one state. And the Supreme Court agrees to hear the most serious challenge to college affirmative action in years. In Minnesota today, the federal trial of 3 former officers charged in the death of George Floyd getting underway today. The 3 are accused of violating Floyd's civil rights by failing to provide medical assistance as a 4th officer, Derek Chauvin, kneeled on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Chauvin was convicted last year of murder and sentenced to 22.5 years in prison. Let's return now to the pandemic and the explosive situation in Virginia over mask requirements in public schools. 7 school districts suing the governor today over his order to make them optional. Katie Beck with that story tonight.
My children will not come to school on Monday with a mask on.
To mask or not to mask? A question now reaching a boiling point in Virginia schools.
We must keep our county's mask mandate in place. Not only do we need it, but we as students demand it.
In effect Monday, newly elected Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin's executive order allowing parents to decide whether their child should wear a mask at school, undoing the previous statewide mandate.
It means that our son will be able to breathe more freely. And we've looked forward to this day for a very long time.
While some districts are celebrating the new direction, others stand firmly against it, saying it puts children's health and safety at risk at a critical time. Several districts refusing to comply with the order and requiring students to continue wearing masks. 7 of them now taking Youngkin to court, challenging an order they call unconstitutional.
I honestly don't want my kids in masks forever at school. That's just not, feasible. But they know it's the right thing to do to protect our others.
The governor's office responding Monday saying they will defend their order as the legal process plays out, and that they're disappointed that these school boards are ignoring parents' rights. Youngkin himself tweeting guidance on the ongoing battle over the weekend. I urge everyone to love your neighbor, to listen to school principals, and to trust the legal process.
And Lester, this issue is not unique to Virginia. We're seeing similar school standoffs happening in Arizona, Florida, and Texas. Many of these fights will end up in court and could take weeks, even months, to be decided. Lester?
Katie Beck, thank you. A major development tonight for the future of affirmative action in college admissions. The Supreme Court will hear an appeal by opponents who say it discriminates against white and Asian students. Pete Williams is here. And Pete, why is the court's decision to hear the case raising alarms?
Because this is the most serious threat in decades, Lester, to considering a student's race in admissions. The court agreed to hear 2 cases challenging race-conscious admissions at a private school, Harvard, and a public one, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. The court has repeatedly ruled that a student's race can be considered as a plus factor in helping schools achieve the educational benefits of a more diverse student body. But 2 justices who ruled in favor of affirmative action in the past, Anthony Kennedy and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, are gone. They were succeeded by Trump appointees Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. They haven't written much on the subject, but it's likely they'll be more skeptical. The court will hear the case in its next term, which begins in October, and that means a decision is at least a year away. Lester?
All right, Pete, thank you for that. Up next, as tax season begins, what you need to know about your refund and the new rules. This is the first day of tax season with the IRS struggling and some new rules to contend with. We asked Stephanie Ruhle to map out what we can expect.
This year, filing taxes could be more complicated, from how to file to what to claim, especially if you haven't received what you're entitled to.
The tax credit came and went. You never got any money. I haven't seen a dime of it yet.
Bridget Barrett gave birth to her son Kiernan last March, making her eligible for the monthly child tax credit. She and her husband were banking on the extra financial help.
I have logged onto the IRS website so many times this past year trying to figure out how to apply.
She never got it and plans to file her taxes as soon as possible to get that money as part of this year's refund.
This tax refund is one of the most important windfalls, probably the largest windfall that most of us get.
If you collected unemployment benefits because you were out of work in 2021, this year, unlike last, you're going to have to pay taxes on those benefits. If you didn't get a stimulus check and were entitled to one, claim it on your taxes. And as for the child tax credit, while parents may be owed money, there's a caveat.
You may end up owing more than you think, because if your income rose throughout the year, for instance, that would be a case when you may not get as much on your taxes as you think.
And most importantly, experts suggest filing electronically, especially if you want to get your refund faster. Stephanie Ruhle, NBC News.
That's Nightly News for this Monday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other.